And the former Luton and Spurs manager, David Pleat, lifts the lid on 6 decades in football in a book he's written to raise funds for motor neuron disease, the illness suffered by his late wife. Next, from facing George Best on the pitch to managing Luton and Spurs, David Pleat's career in football featured many highs and a few lows over 6 decades. Now he's released a book about his time in the game, which will raise money for research into motor neuron disease, having lost his wife to the illness. John Watson went to meet him.
And David Pleat on the right, on the near side of the picture.
David Pleat has seen it all. As a manager, he made his name. As a player in the 60s, he faced one of the best.
Yeah, George Best played against us for Manchester United at Exeter in a cup tie. Manchester won 3-1, as expected.
Georgie Best!
One of the players came into the dressing room prior to the game and say he's not playing. They'd seen him in his clothes in the corridor, and all the boys were quite elated. They were pleased Best wasn't playing. But sure enough, at 3 o'clock, there was a boy in the number 7 shirt, and it was George Best. And Manchester United beat Exeter City 3-1.
It was at Luton, though, you made your name as a manager, and at the time, you had Eric Morecambe as a board member.
I'm like a lucky charm, a little bit, you know. I've got the time.
He was a wonderfully kind gentleman, obviously very funny. Sometimes he would make jokes amongst the players where the players had pre-decided not to laugh, and the joke was on Eric. He used to say to him, aren't you going to bring Ernie Wise, his partner? And Ernie Wise wasn't particularly interested in football, and what Eric more or less told us was that off the field or off the theatre, they weren't that sociable friends. They were just friends and wonderful partnership in the theatre.
We don't want him.
No, no.
On top of that, he's too expensive, isn't he?
Yeah.
How much does he want?
35 quid and 2 Luton players.
You've seen at close hand as well the dark side of football, hooliganism.
It's one of the worst nights of violence in British football. The Prime Minister is demanding action.
In 1985, when you were in charge of Luton against Millwall, a
terrible.
lot of crowd trouble.
Just a selection of mindless idiots who are trying to get the game stopped.
That night was absolutely terrible. I mean, they weren't all Millwall supporters. They were congregated from all London clubs. People were injured, people were hurt, people were bleeding in the tunnel. They were throwing billiard balls at people. It was unbelievable. They were ripping seats up. It was the most terrible night.
From Luton, he would move to Tottenham before working under Lord Alan Sugar, who became chairman of the club.
Alan had the answer to everything. He's a very, very clever man, Alan Sugar. He's a visionary. You know, Sugar said to them, we're having all this money from Sky, and it kept increasing. He said it'll be like prune juice. It'll all go to the players. He said we should retain 60% for salaries, 40% into a fund with grassroots, academies, a fighting fund maybe for later.
One of the best moments, I guess, in your career with Luton as manager was when you famously kept them up. Back in 1983, there's that memorable shot of you stepping out onto the pitch, having beaten Manchester City to secure your safety.
Yeah, I sometimes doesn't make me... I'm happy that, of course, like you score a last-minute goal and you run on the field like a crazy kangaroo or something, whirling dervish, they called me. I don't know what they called me. But the emotion does take over you sometimes in football.
Is there anything quite like that emotion? Is there anything else in life that can replicate that feeling we saw that day?
No, to score a goal in the last minute is irretrievable, or usually nine times out of 10 for sure.
Yeah.
And you know, that's the end of the week's work or whatever it is, and winning and losing is everything in football. Some people live or die by the football results.